Beneath the surface, the sea does not forgive mistakes. This video recounts 6 astonishing shark encounters where ordinary moments, diving, jet skiing, even filming content, turned into battles for survival. From the icy Arctic to the tropical waters of the Philippines, each story pulls you into a world where instinct collides with terror, and escape is never guaranteed. Maya Collins had built her career on chasing danger. At 28, the Los Angeles-based travel influencer was known for live streaming extreme adventures. Skydives, cliff dives, deep dives. With millions of followers hanging on her every move, her latest destination promised a rush like no other. A cage dive with great white sharks off South Australia's Neptune Islands. She arrived 3 days before the scheduled dive, filming everything. The seaplane flight, the rugged coastlines, the rusted cage anchored beside the research boat bobbing in shark-infested waters. By July 9th, the weather was perfect, and anticipation was high. Maya went live early in the morning, her camera fixed to a head-mounted rig, broadcasting everything directly to her audience. She stood on the deck in her wetsuit, smiling into the lens as she adjusted the straps of her gear. Her crew of 4, a marine guide, 2 divers, and a videographer, helped her descend into the cage, which swayed slightly in the cold, clear water. Around her, the ocean shimmered, blue and vast. The bait line hung nearby, drawing the interest of smaller fish. Within minutes, the unmistakable shadow of a great white appeared beneath them. The shark was massive, over 4.5 meters long, wide-bodied, with dull eyes and pale scars etched into its hide. Maya gasped as it passed near the bars, its pectoral fins brushing the metal. Her viewership spiked instantly. The shark circled, then faded into the deep before re-emerging from the gloom, faster this time, more curious, more deliberate. The crew above followed its path with tense focus, readying the flares and poles should it get too close. Maya held her arm out toward the bars to give her viewers a better look at the creature's size, just as it surged forward again. Without warning, the shark accelerated, its snout slamming against the cage with brutal force. The steel rattled violently. The shark twisted, jaw gaping, and one of its teeth scraped across the bars with a high-pitched screech. In that same moment, Maya's right arm was trapped between the cage struts, caught in a sudden gap as the welds bent under pressure. Her body jerked forward and her scream pierced through the live feed. Blood poured into the water from a deep gash across her forearm. The shark thrashed, its eye now level with the cage as it returned, jaws widening as it tried to push its snout through the distorted gap. The crew shouted above, deploying a flare into the water that sizzled and flared red. It only enraged the shark. It charged again, this time ramming its head hard enough to snap one of the front bars, creating a jagged opening. The shark's teeth clamped down on Maya's arm, dragging her against the metal, and the camera, still fixed to her head, caught a blur of thrashing water, foam, and blood before the stream cut out. Above water, chaos erupted. The guide shouted for emergency retrieval as one diver launched into the sea. Another struck the shark with a pole, trying to force it back. The shark held on, grinding its jaws before finally retreating, ripping a chunk of flesh and neoprene as it backed away into the deep. Maya's body slumped into the cage, blood clouding the water around her. The rescue diver pulled her free as another flare lit the sea with a dull red light. Maya was unconscious, her arm mangled, the wetsuit shredded down to the bone. Her pulse was weak. The crew hauled her onto the deck as the medic applied a tourniquet, and the boat captain sent an emergency call to shore. Within minutes, a helicopter arrived, landing just offshore on a makeshift platform. Maya was loaded in, her condition critical. The crew stood silent as the rotor wash scattered bloodied towels and gear across the deck. Back online, the live stream had abruptly ended in horror. Viewers who had tuned in expecting thrills had instead witnessed real terror, and screen captures of Maya's scream and the shark's sudden charge flooded social media before the platform could respond. The footage went viral almost immediately, prompting an onslaught of reactions, from grief to outrage, fascination to panic. Authorities confirmed the authenticity of the video but refrained from releasing any official footage. They emphasized that cage diving protocols would be reviewed and that the cage had met all safety standards before the dive. Marine experts speculated that the shark, likely a mature male known to frequent the area, had been agitated by prolonged exposure to baiting and cage movement. The bars had buckled under repeated impact, something almost unheard of in recent years. Critics called it a predictable tragedy, warning that influencers increasingly risked their lives for views. Others defended Maya, saying she had followed expert guidance and that the blame fell on lax oversight and faulty equipment. Maya remained in critical condition for days. Surgeons fought to save her arm, but the damage was catastrophic. Bones were shattered, nerves severed, tissue lost to the bite in the sea. Eventually, her right arm was amputated above the elbow. Her recovery would be long, and public updates were sparse after the first week. Friends described her as devastated, physically broken, and emotionally wrecked by the trauma. For many of her followers, the attack was more than just a viral moment. It was a disturbing glimpse into how quickly entertainment could turn into tragedy. The image of the shark pressing into the cage, Maya's scream echoing underwater, and the sudden explosion of blood had burned itself into their minds. Some said they couldn't sleep after watching it. Others blamed the platform for not cutting the feed sooner. Influencer communities began debating the ethics of high-risk content, especially when safety margins were thin and unpredictable. But for those on the boat that day, the memory was worse than anything a video could capture. The sound of metal tearing, the flash of white teeth, the helplessness as Maya was dragged against the bars. Those moments replayed in their minds over and over. None of them spoke publicly in the days after the attack. The diver who pulled her out later left the company entirely. Maya's story would be told in documentaries, debated on podcasts, and studied in marine safety courses. But for her, it was no longer a story about followers or fame. It was a raw, permanent scar etched deep into her body and her life. The sun blazed overhead in the clear blue sky, casting shimmering reflections across the gentle waves near Donsel Bay in the Philippines. It was the height of the tourist season, and the small dive boat had been loaded with eager visitors. 10 in all, a mix of local and foreign divers and snorkelers, all drawn by the promise of swimming alongside the gentle giants of the sea, whale sharks. Among them was Julia Ramirez, a 34-year-old marine biologist from Manila who had come to study the whale sharks' migration patterns. And beside her was Mark Thompson, a recreational diver from Australia with a passion for underwater photography. The rest were tourists, some seasoned swimmers, others novices with little experience in open water. The boat was modest, roughly 8 meters long with an outboard motor, packed tightly with diving gear. Masks, fins, oxygen tanks, and cameras strapped to chests. The local boat captain, Manuel, guided the vessel carefully into the protected waters where whale sharks frequently appeared. The early part of the day was serene. The water was calm, the current weak, and the boat floated steadily as the group spotted their first whale shark, a huge spotted silhouette cutting through the blue depths. Excitement rippled through the passengers as they prepared to enter the water. Julia checked her mask and adjusted her fins, scanning the horizon for the whale shark. It was a colossal creature, nearly 10 meters long, with its massive head and wide mouth slowly filtering water. Its movements were slow and graceful, completely non-threatening. One by one, the tourists slipped into the water, careful to maintain a respectful distance as instructed by Manuel. Cameras flashed, bubbles drifted upward, and the divers followed the whale shark as it glided effortlessly through the sea. For several minutes, the group swam in a loose formation, marveling at the giant's peaceful presence. Julia noted the gentle sways of its tail and the pattern of spots across its back, while Mark captured dozens of images, focusing on the play of sunlight on its skin. The whale shark's massive body moved with surprising delicacy, stirring only a faint ripple in the otherwise still water. The atmosphere was one of awe and reverence. Suddenly, everything changed. The whale shark shifted direction sharply, veering closer to the surface directly under the boat. The water rippled violently as its enormous tail rose in a slow, sweeping arc. The passengers glimpsed the massive tail fin as it cut through the water. But there was no warning before it crashed down onto the side of the boat with a force that sent wood cracking and metal banging. The vessel lurched hard, tipping precariously toward one side. The boat captain shouted warnings, but the movement was too sudden and violent. The whale shark's tail struck again, this time directly beneath the hull, sending the boat tipping over completely with a loud splash. Shouts turned into screams as passengers were thrown into the sea, their equipment and belongings scattered into the water. The boat flipped upside down, its hull rising like a giant mushroom cap, leaving everyone struggling to stay afloat in churning, turbulent water. Julia fought to keep her mask secure, gripping her snorkel as she kicked away from the sinking vessel. She could hear the frantic breaths of others nearby, mingled with the pounding of waves against overturned wood. Her heart hammered as she searched for Mark, who had disappeared beneath the surface during the capsize. Panic gripped her momentarily before she saw his hand break the surface, waving frantically. In the chaos, visibility plunged as sediment and debris swirled through the water, blurring the outlines of bodies and objects. The whale sharks, startled by the disturbance, slipped away into the depths, leaving the sea empty and cold around the struggling swimmers. But the danger was far from over. One diver, a young tourist named Alex, was pinned briefly beneath the boat's hull, trapped by the sudden inversion of the craft. His muffled cries for help were heard by Manuel and Julia, who dove beneath to free him. With great effort, they pried him loose, coughing and gasping as he surfaced. Meanwhile, another diver named Lisa was struck hard by a flailing whale shark tail. The impact snapped her arm at the elbow, sending her into shock as she clutched the broken limb to her chest. Manuel quickly grabbed a makeshift sling from his bag and tied it around her arm, while other passengers did their best to comfort her, despite the panic swirling around them. As the group fought to keep calm and stay together, the shadows beneath the water added to the terror. Julia saw a dark shape moving swiftly in the distance and momentarily froze, fear tightening her chest. She wasn't the only one. Others gasped and scattered, mistaking the shadow for a predatory shark. But the captain's steady voice and the presence of rescue boats arriving 20 minutes later helped contain the mounting panic. The rescue boats, dispatched from the nearby harbor, appeared like saviors cutting through the waves. Their crews tossed lines and life jackets, hauling the soaked and shaken passengers from the water. Julia was among the last to be lifted aboard. Her breath ragged but her body intact except for bruises and exhaustion. Mark was helped aboard as well, his camera damaged but his spirit unbroken. On shore, emergency personnel checked the group. No lives were lost, but the injuries were real. Lisa's broken arm required urgent medical attention, and several others suffered minor cuts and bruises from debris and impacts. The incident sent shockwaves through the local ecotourism community. Authorities launched investigations into the circumstances surrounding the capsize, questioning the adequacy of safety protocols, the size of the boat relative to the number of passengers, and the handling of whale shark interactions. Julia's reports from the incident stirred heated debate online and in marine conservation circles. Many praised the importance of whale shark ecotourism in providing income and raising awareness about these endangered creatures. Yet the dangers posed by close interaction, even with docile giants, were brought to the fore. The whale shark's sheer size and power meant that any sudden movement could turn a peaceful encounter into a life-threatening event. In the days following, Manuel and the dive operators faced criticism for their role in what some called reckless tourism. They defended their practices, pointing to years of successful tours with no major incidents. But the capsize underscored the thin line between awe and danger, when humans encroached on the natural habitats of enormous animals. Julia herself struggled with the trauma of the event. As a marine biologist, she understood the behavior of whale sharks better than most. Yet the experience left her shaken. She wrestled with the knowledge that despite their gentle nature, these animals could unintentionally cause destruction simply because of their immense size. For her, the incident was a harsh reminder of the ocean's unpredictability and the need for respect and caution. The tourists who had joined the dive would never forget the sudden terror of being thrown into the deep with a massive living force so close. Some vowed never to return to such tours, while others remained captivated by the whale shark's majesty despite the danger. The capsized boat was eventually recovered and repaired, but it became a symbol of the risks inherent in wildlife tourism. In the end, the whale sharks returned to the deep. Their slow, serene movements resumed far from the chaos they had inadvertently caused. The waters around Donsol remained a vital habitat, but the incident served as a stark warning. Even the gentlest giants could become agents of disaster when the fragile balance between humans and nature was disrupted. The early morning sky was painted with soft hues of pink and orange as the fishing boat Seahawk cut through the choppy waters off South Africa's coast. It was July 18, 2025, the height of the annual tuna fishing tournament, where seasoned crews competed for the coveted prize of the largest catch. Among them was the team from Durban, led by veteran angler Peter van der Merwe, a 42-year-old with over 20 years of experience on the sea. His crew of 5 men, rugged, skilled, and determined, was focused on one target, a massive yellowfin tuna rumored to be lurking beneath the waves. The day had been filled with excitement and tension as boats jockeyed for position and anglers tested their strength against powerful fish. Peter's crew had already landed several medium-sized tuna, but none matched the size of the giant they spotted early in the afternoon. The rod bent sharply as a 70-kilogram yellowfin fought fiercely, thrashing in the water and pulling line off the reel with explosive bursts. Peter called out commands, directing the crew to steady the line and prepare the gaff hook. As the fish neared the surface, anticipation rose. The crew readied themselves to bring the tuna aboard, their muscles tense and eyes locked on the prize. Peter reached for the gaff, his grip firm, when suddenly, from the depths below, a shadow appeared, fast, fierce, and deadly. A massive mako shark nearly 2 meters long burst from the water with terrifying speed, mouth wide, teeth gleaming in the sunlight. It targeted the struggling tuna, snapping its jaws shut around the fish with a violent jerk. The attack was so sudden and powerful that the mako's momentum launched it through the air, hurtling directly toward the deck of the Seahawk. The boat rocked violently as the shark crashed onto the wooden floor, thrashing wildly with desperate, violent movements. The crew scrambled in shock, stumbling over each other to avoid the thrashing predator. Peter barely had time to react as the shark's razor-sharp teeth sliced into the leg of his crewmate, Johann, who was closest to the point of impact. Blood erupted from a deep, ragged wound just above Johann's knee, the pain immediate and searing. Johann collapsed backward, clutching his leg as the mako's powerful tail swung with lethal force, striking Peter's ribs with a brutal crack that stole his breath. The deck was a chaotic mix of seawater, blood, and frantic motion as the crew fought to keep the shark at bay. The predator's eyes rolled wildly as it writhed, trying to regain the water that could save its life. Peter grabbed the gaff hook and lunged, stabbing it into the shark's side. The creature howled with rage, thrashing harder, teeth snapping dangerously close to the hands and feet of the men. Johann screamed, the pain radiating through his leg. But the team's determination did not waver. With coordinated effort, Peter and the others managed to push the mako toward the edge of the boat. Using every ounce of strength, they levered the shark overboard, finally sending it crashing back into the sea with a heavy splash. The water calmed briefly as the shark disappeared beneath the surface, leaving behind a boat still trembling from the shock and a crew soaked in blood and seawater. Johann's injury was severe. The deep bite had torn through muscle and tendon, leaving bones visible beneath the ragged edges of flesh. Blood poured relentlessly from the wound, pooling on the deck and dripping into the ocean below. The crew quickly applied a tourniquet, pressing towels tightly against the wound to slow the bleeding. Johann's face was pale, sweat mixed with salt water running down his forehead, but his eyes held fierce determination not to succumb. Peter radioed the shore-based medical team, requesting an urgent medevac. The tournament officials quickly dispatched a rescue helicopter, which arrived within 30 minutes to airlift Johann to a nearby hospital. His condition was critical but stable, and surgeons prepared immediately for emergency surgery to save his leg and repair the extensive damage. The rest of the crew sat in stunned silence, the adrenaline fading and reality sinking in. What had started as a routine fishing trip had turned into a nightmare. They replayed the moment in their minds, the sudden eruption of the mako, the uncontrollable chaos on deck, the close calls with death inches away. Peter's ribs throbbed painfully, and he knew the injury would require weeks of recovery, but the trauma of the encounter ran deeper than physical wounds. Experts later analyzed the incident, emphasizing its rarity but undeniable reality. Mako sharks were known for their speed and aggression, apex predators in their environment, but attacks on boats were uncommon. The sheer force of the shark's lunge demonstrated how quickly nature's balance could shift from sport to survival. The incident became a cautionary tale in fishing circles, a reminder that even the most experienced anglers faced unpredictable dangers when pitting themselves against wild creatures. The tournament continued, but Peter's team withdrew. The lingering shock made returning impossible. The other crews kept a wary eye on the waters, respecting the makos' presence with renewed caution. The incident sparked debates about fishing practices, safety measures on boats, and the need for better emergency preparedness during such competitions. For Peter, the encounter was a turning point. The sea had always been a source of pride and livelihood, but now it held a reminder of its merciless power. The image of the mako shark, snapping, thrashing, tearing, would haunt him long after the wound on his ribs had healed. He vowed to honor Johann's courage and to speak openly about the risks that lurked beneath the waves. Johann, too, faced a long road ahead. Surgery saved his leg, but the recovery was grueling, filled with pain and uncertainty. The bite wound left scars that would never fade, both physical and emotional. He struggled with nightmares of the shark's teeth and the helplessness he felt during the attack. Yet he held on to a stubborn hope that one day he would return to the sea, stronger and wiser. The Seahawk itself bore the marks of the encounter, the scuffed deck, bloodstains, and splintered wood, telling the story of a day when fishing turned into a desperate fight for survival. The boat would be repaired and returned to the water, but the memory of that violent moment lingered like a shadow over its decks. The fishing community learned from the incident, implementing stricter safety protocols and encouraging crews to train for emergency shark encounters. They studied shark behavior more closely, respecting the delicate line between predator and prey, human and wild. In the end, the attack was a reminder that the ocean was no place for complacency. The apex predators ruled these waters with fierce authority, their power unmatched. And for those who dared to test their luck, the boundary between sport and danger was razor thin, always ready to snap. Tom Ridley had always been drawn to the ocean's wild energy. At 29, he was an experienced jet ski enthusiast and a marine biology student who loved testing his skills against the waves off Western Australia's Coral Bay. The morning was bright and the water calm, with gentle swells rolling in from the Indian Ocean. The coastline stretched out in both directions, jagged with rocky outcrops and sandy beaches. Tom had set out alone, eager to carve the waves before the afternoon heat settled in. His jet ski sliced effortlessly through the water, the engine's roar blending with the cries of distant seabirds. The air smelled fresh, salty, filled with the subtle scent of seaweed and sun-warmed sand. As he gained speed, Tom leaned into the curves, chasing the spray and feeling the surge beneath him. It was freedom, pure, exhilarating, and peaceful. Then suddenly a jolt shook the back of his jet ski. It was sharp and forceful, enough to throw him off balance but not enough to topple him. Tom's heart quickened as he scanned the water around him. Out of the blue, a massive shadow broke the surface just meters from his right side. It was a great white shark, at least 4 meters long, its wide mouth revealing rows of sharp, serrated teeth. The shark's dark eyes locked onto him. Before Tom could react, the shark lunged forward with terrifying speed. Its jaws clamped down hard on the rear of the jet ski, tearing through the fiberglass hull with brutal force. The machine groaned and shuddered violently as the fuel line ruptured, spraying gasoline into the water and causing the engine to sputter. Tom's grip tightened on the handles, but the damage was done. The back half of the jet ski began to sink rapidly. Thrown by the sudden shift, Tom was pitched off the vehicle and plunged into the chilly water. He broke the surface, gasping for air as the waves rocked him. Cuts stung along his thigh where rough coral and broken fiberglass scraped his skin during the fall. Blood mixed with seawater, trailing faint red clouds around him. The jet ski's engine died with a final sputter, and the machine disappeared beneath the surface within seconds. Tom's survival instincts kicked in immediately. He knew the shark was still near, its presence unmistakable as it circled the sinking jet ski. The great white's massive body moved with eerie grace, its skin rough and cold against Tom's legs as it brushed by. There was an undeniable menace in its eyes, a reminder that this was an apex predator assessing a possible threat or prey. Despite the shock and pain, Tom forced himself to stay calm. He knew that panic would only waste precious energy. He scanned the shoreline and spotted a rocky outcrop about 80 meters away. It was his only chance. Kicking hard, he began to swim toward it, each stroke burning his arms and legs but fueled by pure willpower. The shark followed, keeping pace in the water with slow, deliberate movements, as if curious but not yet attacking. The distance seemed endless. The water churned around Tom's bruised body and the cuts on his thigh burned with each movement. He fought waves and fatigue, urging himself forward despite the weight of fear pressing down on his chest. The shark's presence was constant, its shadow moving just below the surface like a dark ghost. As Tom neared the rocky outcrop, the sun glinted on a small tour boat cruising nearby. The crew spotted his frantic struggle, raising alarms and pulling him aboard with swift efficiency. His body shook uncontrollably, muscles trembling from exhaustion, cold, and adrenaline. The tour boat's captain wrapped a warm blanket around Tom, who could barely speak. gasping for breath while his eyes darted nervously toward the water. The great white lingered a moment longer, circling the area with slow, deliberate motions before vanishing beneath the waves. Tom watched helplessly as his jet ski disappeared completely, swallowed by the ocean's depths. The tour boat immediately radioed for emergency medical support, and Tom was taken to the nearest hospital for treatment. His injuries were primarily superficial, but the psychological impact ran deep. Experts later described the shark's behavior as an assertive test strike, a method by which great whites investigate unfamiliar objects in their environment. The vibrations from the jet ski's engine likely attracted the shark's attention, triggering a response that was more about curiosity and defense than hunger. Still, the event underscored the dangers inherent in interacting with these powerful predators, especially when mechanical noise and sudden movements provoke their instincts. For Tom, the attack was a terrifying wake-up call. The ocean he loved so much had revealed its unpredictability and the fragile balance between thrill-seeker and wild animal. His recovery included both physical healing and mental resilience, as he grappled with memories of the shark's sudden assault and the feeling of helplessness as his trusted machine sank beneath the waves. The incident sparked renewed discussions within Australia's coastal communities and marine tourism sectors about safety measures for personal watercraft users. Authorities recommended increased awareness of shark activity zones and suggested carrying emergency flotation devices and signaling equipment. Some local operators called for better monitoring of shark populations to warn riders and swimmers of heightened activity. Despite the trauma, Tom remained determined to return to the ocean one day, but with a deeper respect and caution. His story served as a sobering reminder that even the most routine encounters could shift in an instant, transforming joy into danger. The vast waters of Western Australia held beauty and threat intertwined, and those who ventured into its realm would always need to honor that delicate balance. The morning sun had just begun to warm the coastline as 26-year-old Vincent Malang stepped into the shallow waters of the Umgini River mouth, near Durban. It was winter in South Africa, and though the air was crisp, the estuary remained a popular spot among locals for early swims. Vincent, a fitness enthusiast and experienced swimmer, had grown up in KwaZulu-Natal and knew the river's moods well. But he also knew it had a reputation, a place where fresh water met salt, where sediment clouded the water, and where predators sometimes roamed. Recent rains had swollen the river, flushing bait fish toward the mouth and stirring up debris and nutrients that attracted larger marine animals. Locals had spoken of increased fish activity near the estuary in the past week, and some fishermen noted the presence of juvenile sharks trailing the schools. Still, it was early and quiet, and Vincent wasn't alone. A few joggers moved along the sand. A couple stood on the edge of the rocks, watching the pale sky brighten. No one expected what was about to happen. Vincent waded in slowly, the cold water rising past his waist. The surface was calm, but visibility beneath was poor, dark with suspended particles and broken light. Just minutes into his swim, witnesses heard a sharp, piercing scream from the water. Eyes turned instantly to the source, where Vincent's arms flailed violently and the surface erupted into a froth of water and blood. A bull shark, likely over 2 meters long, had struck with devastating force, locking onto his leg and dragging him under before anyone could respond. There was a moment of eerie stillness. Then Vincent resurfaced, his face pale, his mouth open in a silent cry. Part of his leg was missing below the knee, torn away by the shark's powerful jaws. He floundered in a spreading pool of red, desperately trying to stay afloat, but the shark, employing a classic hit-and-hold technique, circled below. In seconds, it struck again, pulling him beneath the surface with a final violent thrash. On shore, panic erupted. People screamed for help, others called emergency services, while some sprinted toward the lifeguard post. Within minutes, a rescue response was underway. A small patrol boat launched from the nearby harbor, speeding upriver to the site of the attack. Volunteers joined from the shore with binoculars and drones, scouring the surface for any sign of movement. But Vincent had vanished. An hour passed before the search team spotted something floating near the river bend. His body, motionless and pale, caught in reeds and drifting debris. They pulled him aboard, laying him across the rescue deck with quiet reverence. His thigh and abdomen bore deep crescent-shaped wounds, unmistakably caused by the serrated teeth of a large bull shark. The leg had been severed almost entirely, and there were secondary lacerations along his side and lower back. Paramedics confirmed what was already evident. Vincent had died from massive blood loss and trauma. His body was taken for forensic examination, while officials sealed off the river mouth and the surrounding beach. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind as law enforcement and marine officials launched an investigation. Locals stood in shock at the riverbank, many weeping, others silently staring at the water that had turned deadly so quickly. Experts reviewing the scene explained that bull sharks were well adapted to such environments. Unlike most sharks, they could survive in both saltwater and freshwater, and they often moved upriver during the winter months. The murky water, combined with recent rains stirring up prey, made the estuary a prime hunting ground. Vincent had likely been mistaken for a prey item, an unfortunate victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Authorities declared the attack a rare but classic example of bull shark predation. The strike had all the hallmarks of a hit-and-hold approach. An explosive first bite intended to maim and immobilize, followed by a retreat and final return to finish the kill. The depth of the bite wounds and the quick succession of attacks supported the theory. Marine officials noted the pattern was consistent with similar incidents reported globally in muddy estuarine environments. In the days that followed, the community mourned. Vincent's family issued a short statement describing him as a bright, loving, and adventurous soul who had always respected the ocean. Memorials were held at the riverbank, with flowers laid near the rocks where he'd last been seen. His death sent ripples through the neighborhood and reignited calls for improved safety around the estuary. Public pressure mounted quickly. Locals demanded better signage warning of shark activity, more visible patrols during early morning hours, and clear guidelines for when and where swimming should be allowed. Environmental officials responded by closing the beach for 72 hours, sweeping the area for further shark presence and reviewing shark movement patterns logged by nearby marine stations. Though rare, attacks like this had occurred before in the region. Bull sharks were known residents of the area, especially during winter, when freshwater discharge from inland rains pushed baitfish toward the coast. Experts emphasized education and awareness over fear, urging the public to respect shark behavior and to stay out of known risk zones during periods of low visibility and heightened marine activity. Still, for those who witnessed the attack, the horror remained. The image of Vincent disappearing beneath the water, the suddenness of the strike, and the helplessness of watching from shore without the ability to intervene. Those moments were burned into memory. The Umgini River flowed on, calm and silent once more. But beneath its surface, unseen currents carried the weight of a tragedy that would not soon be forgotten. The water beneath the Arctic ice shelf was black, bitterly cold, and deadly silent. Marine biologist Eric Soren had spent years studying deep-sea creatures, but nothing prepared him for the isolation beneath the frozen edge of the world. On that day in late March, Eric was diving solo beneath a remote section of ice off Svalbard, tasked with installing a high-resolution camera rig at a depth of 40 meters to study the slow movements of polar marine life. The sun above was weak, filtered through meters of blue-white ice. Light faded fast, leaving only a dim green haze and the constant hum of his air regulator in his ears. Diving here was extreme, frigid temperatures near zero, limited visibility, and no margin for error. Eric wore a specialized dry suit, his oxygen tank strapped tight, and a tether connected him to a surface team through a narrow ice chimney overhead. Descending slowly, he passed massive ice walls with jagged edges, ancient and unmoving. The silence of the deep Arctic was oppressive, pressing in from every direction. When he reached the camera station on the seabed, Eric's fingers were already stiff from the cold. He knelt on the silt-covered floor, securing the tripod legs, adjusting the lens angle, and activating the system. His breath echoed loudly inside his mask. Each movement had to be precise, rehearsed. The longer he stayed at depth, the more dangerous the dive became. Then something shifted. Out of the haze came a slow, deliberate movement. A shadow, huge and indistinct, emerged from the gloom. At first, Eric thought it was part of the ice shelf itself, but then it moved closer, its outline taking shape. A Greenland shark, nearly 5 meters long, its body thick and scarred, approached without a sound. Its mouth hung slightly open, its small eyes dull and expressionless, its movements slow but unyielding. Eric froze. Greenland sharks were rarely seen this clearly, let alone this close. Ancient and near blind, they moved like ghosts, perfectly adapted to these depths. But they were also unpredictable, massive, powerful, and shrouded in mystery. Eric's heart pounded. His instincts screamed to ascend, but he knew sudden movement could provoke curiosity or worse. The shark circled once, its motion steady, each beat of its tail sending waves through the water. Then it faded into the gloom. Eric exhaled slowly, trying to regain focus. He turned to adjust the final camera clamp, his hands trembling. That's when it came back. The Greenland shark reappeared from the darkness, this time closer, just beyond arm's reach. Eric's body tensed. The shark's approach was unhurried, deliberate. It moved past him at an angle, its rough gray skin brushing against his tank with a low scraping sound. The sensation jolted through his body. The shark showed no overt aggression, but its sheer size and proximity made it clear. In this world, Eric was not in control. Suddenly, his low-air alarm beeped, a sharp, repeating tone that pierced the silence. Eric looked at his monitor. His dive time was up. He reached for his tether and kicked gently upward toward the narrow chimney he had entered through. But something was wrong. The tether had twisted above, caught on a jagged edge of ice. He yanked it once, then again, but it held fast. Below, the shark continued its slow circle, almost indifferent, yet never far. Eric's oxygen levels dropped steadily. His breaths grew faster, louder. Each moment felt stretched, the cold closing in tighter. He used his gloved hands to free the line. Fingers numb, motion awkward and rushed. Above him, the ice walls narrowed, and there was no backup entry. Just as panic threatened to take hold, the tether slipped loose. Eric didn't waste a second. He kicked hard toward the shaft of green light above. His body scraped the sides of the ice chimney as he ascended, lungs burning, arms heavy. The shark did not follow. Instead, it drifted slowly back into the abyss as if watching him vanish through the only exit. Eric broke the surface seconds before losing consciousness, gasping as his head emerged from the freezing water. The surface crew hauled him out quickly, wrapping him in blankets and checking his vitals. His oxygen tank was nearly empty. He barely registered their voices, his mind spinning with what he had just seen. The shark hadn't attacked, hadn't even lunged, but its closeness, its eerie calm, had pushed him to the edge of fear. Later, when the surface team retrieved the camera rig and reviewed the footage, they were stunned. The Greenland shark had tracked Eric for over 11 minutes, gliding silently around him in widening and tightening loops. The video showed a creature ancient in form and behavior, observing, waiting. Its movements as slow as they were calculated. It never once struck, but its interest in the diver was unmistakable. Eric reviewed the footage in silence, the memory still fresh in his mind. Greenland sharks were not typically seen as aggressive toward humans, but so little was known about them, how they chose their prey, how they responded to human presence, what instincts governed their slow, relentless movements. The encounter sparked a wave of concern in Arctic diving circles. While Greenland sharks were considered low risk, Eric's footage added a layer of uncertainty. What happened beneath the ice that day could have ended very differently. Divers operating in extreme environments were reminded that even slow-moving predators carried danger, and proximity alone could be a silent threat. Eric returned to his research weeks later, but he never forgot the shadow in the deep, the scrape of rough skin on his tank, the empty gaze, the slow circling pass of something that belonged to another time. It hadn't attacked, but it hadn't left him alone either. It had simply waited, as if the cold, dark world below the ice was already its own, and Eric was only passing through.